right, episode 3. We're back and we are in a studio. We only lasted twice doing it ourselves.
Yeah, that was a little bit too much. I think we underestimated how long it would take to edit a podcast ourselves.
Yeah, and I don't know if I was just like really slow at it or I just couldn't be fucked, but like I am the person who I'm like, yeah, I can do that. And then I sat down and I was like, I actually don't want to do that. So yeah, episode 3, we are in a studio. Excited.
Yeah, I think, well, we're both pretty busy people, so I'm sure you'd
Yes.
get quicker at it the more you do it. Like any skill, you get better at it, right? But at the end of the day, I think this will be a lot easier for us.
Yeah, it's more our vibe anyway. And
Yeah.
honestly, I just got sick of listening to us. I had to listen to us probably like
Yeah.
5 or 6 times through.
Yeah.
Not that we weren't wonderful to listen to, but bit over our own voices by the end of it. But anyway, how are you? How was the last week? I haven't seen you in a little while.
Yeah, so my week has been a little bit crazy. I've been away in Perth this week, so I went over there for one of my clients' shows. I train clients for fitness competitions like bikini comps, so had a client competing over there, went over there to support her. We also had some clients competing in Melbourne the same weekend, so it's been a crazy week actually with the travel being over there. I also just started with a business consultant too, who's just kind of helping me refine some business processes so I can like add more value for my clients, free up some more of my time so I can do things like creating content and things like that I just don't really have time for at the moment. So it's been pretty hectic. That's added a fair bit to my workload, but I know it will be worth it in the end. So yeah, it's been good. How about your week?
Yeah, my week has been super busy. Like, just asked me, oh, like, has your week been busy? I'm like, they're all busy.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, we are talking about hustle culture today, so we're going to probably get into that a little bit more. But yeah, most of my weekends now are not really kind of like weekends in terms of like time off. I just do different work. So I did a lot of adult things on Saturday. I was telling you in the car, I made a enormous budget spreadsheet and you're like, don't talk about that on the podcast. That's really boring. But I think it's not. And spreadsheets are my love language. So yeah, that's what I did on Saturday. But it's honestly like, it's an adult thing that you kind of have to do. Like I was just like bleeding money, being like, the fuck is all my money going? Like I had to kind of sit down and be like, all right, time to put your head in, like work out. There's no point working this hard if it's just like going everywhere and you don't really know where it's going. And actually like I was speaking to Liv yesterday and she was like, yeah, this like, I struggle with it too, like the money side of it, or like I can do the thing, like the business thing, but then like the money side of it is a bit harder. So yeah, like getting on top of all of that. And then Sunday was podcast stuff, and then just been working and training and doing all the things in between, not taking any time off as you would yell at me for.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So we want to talk about hustle culture today, and I guess balancing your work and how to know when to hustle and when to kind of pull back so that you are looking after yourself. But Loz and I, in talking about this topic, we were saying this is going to be our first fight on air for you guys to witness, which is mainly just because I suppose we're in really different stages of our business. But I think that's going to make for a really good conversation about this topic.
Yeah, I know that when we were first planning the podcast, I think this was probably the first topic that you said you wanted to talk about. Like, why is it something that you feel like super passionate about? Because I know that you do.
Yeah, so I feel really passionate about this topic in particular because I have been there where I've been in the position that I literally burnt myself into the ground from hustling too hard for years on end. And I'm passionate about it because I see so many women hustling so hard and they're like, I'm on top of this. I'm getting through this. You know, I'm not suffering any negative consequences. I'm fine. I can cope with this workload. But I'm telling you now, you don't realize the damage that is doing to your body until you hit rock bottom. And that's kind of like the story that I went through when I had adrenal issues. So I had what's called moderate adrenal insufficiency, which is essentially one step before you hit chronic fatigue. When you're working really hard all the time, basically what happens within your body is your cortisol, which is a stress hormone, when that is being produced to a really high level all the time and you're running off high cortisol, eventually your adrenal glands actually can't keep up with that output level. So instead they downregulate, which then means you have really low cortisol. When you hit low cortisol, that's even worse than high cortisol because it's really like you lose all your energy and drive. It's so hard to get things done because cortisol is what like helps you to get things done. So when you hit that really low cortisol level, that's when we have adrenal insufficiency. And when you get there, it's just so hard to come back from. And that's why I'm really passionate about this topic, because I want to help women see that there's another way to hustle and do it from a place where you're still looking after yourself, so that you don't hit that rock bottom and go through what I went through. Because when I hit that level, I had to pull back on everything. Like, I had to stop weight training for a bit. I could just do like yoga and walking and things like that, because my body was so burnt out. I couldn't even lift weights. I went from being able to squat 85 kilos for reps to only being able to do 45 kilos. Like, my body was literally so burnt out. And so, yeah, I guess I just don't want other women to go through that. And I think hustling is so glamorized nowadays. Like, everyone online is out there running their own businesses or doing a side hustle, and like, that's great, but you still have to look after yourself. And if you don't, like, it's going to catch up with you one day.
Yeah, like I definitely agree with all of that. And I think the thing is with like the online space is, yeah, everyone's out there running their own businesses and doing their side hustles and stuff, as you said, but you are only looking at the minority, I think, like, because the people who aren't doing that aren't posting about not doing it, if that makes sense. So, and also, like, you don't even really know how much is real. Like, I know I kind of say this a lot about Instagram, but I see it time and time again, where you see, you know, like the happy relationship and you know they're not, or like you see the person doing work and then you can see them in real life and they're not actually doing it. So it's like, you do have to take that with like a grain of salt as well. But I think like your business is obviously like at quite a decent level now. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, do you think that there was a time where that was required, like to get it to a certain level? Like, do you think that you have to kind of go through a bit of a hustle phase at the start?
100%. You definitely need to hustle when you want to get something off the ground. And I don't think it's about not hustling, but it's about balancing that out. So it's the same as, have you heard the saying, like, you can only train as hard as you can recover?
Yeah.
It's like, there's no actual thing as overtraining as long as you're recovering from it. And everyone's ability to recover is going to be different. It's kind of the same with hustling in business. Like, you can hustle really hard, but you need to make sure that you're making time for the stillness and the slowness and the switching off to balance that out. Because if you're not coming out of that sympathetic nervous system state, which is that overactivation, high cortisol state, if you're not coming out of that, that's when our adrenal glands start to suffer. So it's more about finding that balance. So when I was in my hustle phase, I'd started working as a PT in the gym, obviously. That grew very, very quickly. I built my client base very quickly when I started my PT. This is about 10 or more years ago now. I was going into my second comp prep, so obviously training really hard. I was actually only sleeping 4 to 6 hours a night maximum. I've always kind of struggled with my sleep a lot, but during this time I was actually given an Apple Watch through work and started tracking my sleep. And even though I was in bed for a time, I was only getting 4 to 6 hours of sleep. And so that obviously didn't work, because sleep is a huge part of our ability to recover. I wasn't really prioritizing things like meditation or slowing down. I was just like grind. I'd start in the gym at 6 a.m. with clients. I'd finish at 8 p.m. Like, I'd be there training. Everyone was like, do you live here? Like, is your bed out the back? Because
you're like, hey, that's actually not a bad idea.
I was tempted.
You get travel time back.
Yeah. So I was just grinding really hard, but I wasn't prioritizing the switching off side of things. And after a fair bit of time with that, I was coping okay with that. Like, I've always been a really high output person. I've always done a lot. Like, I've always trained really hard. I've always studied really hard. I've always been able to have a high level of output in everything that I do. But then I added in like emotional stress with a relationship that I was in at the time. And that, I think, is what sent me over the edge.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you can't hustle hard, and you need to. Like, if you got to work hard if you want something to be successful, but it's just about incorporating that stillness and slowing down, switching off from the get-go, I think.
I think it's really important what you said there in terms of like the relationship. And what I mean by that is like stress is stress, right? Like you have a bandwidth and your body doesn't care if it's because like you've had a fight with your partner or you've got a sick family member or you're working, 80 hours a week and training. Like they're all types of stress. Your body doesn't care where it's going, like where it's coming from, sorry. And so if you don't have, I guess, like high levels of stress in one area, you can probably output higher in another area. Like, for example, like at the moment, I'm single. I don't have a partner to fight with or any sort of thing in that area that is making me stressed. Is it because I'm just not playing in that field at all? Yeah, probably. But I've actually recognized that, being like, okay, like my attention or focus, not that I'm closed off to that area, but I'm definitely not putting any sort of like real time or effort into it in terms of like finding a partner or anything like that. Because I know for right now, like my focus is elsewhere. Like my focus is work and building something, and also friends, like making new connections in a new place, like things that are building to a future that I'm so sure of like where I'm going. But I know that, say, if I was in a relationship like last year, I could barely like string two words together. Like there's no way I could be doing what I am doing right now. And so it is an important kind of like thing to point out that like you do have to allocate stress, like, and learn when to put the foot down, learn when to, pull back based on other things that are going on in your life. Like when I used to coach like nutrition clients, and they'd be talking about, other stresses in their life. Maybe it was a relationship, maybe it was work's really hectic. I've just started a new job, blah, blah, blah. And you would probably be the same, where you're like, now's not the time to diet. Well, it depends. Bodybuilding doesn't really allow for that much flexibility. But if they're not like competing or had a date, you'd be like, now's not the time, because you're not going to introduce more stress, like diet stress, into an already stress-filled life.
Yeah, I'd also say don't compete if you're in that sort of position, right? Like you need that, because it's like a bucket.
It's 100%.
And everyone has a different size bucket as well. That once your stress bucket overflows, like that's when it's all too much. But everyone has a different size bucket, and you can, take strategies, I suppose, to reduce the level of your bucket.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, I guess the reason that I'm saying this is I think with the glorification of that you're saying, with hustle culture, it's like one person might kind of like look at another person and what they're doing and be like, oh, I couldn't do that, or maybe I should be working harder. And I just think it's like with anything, comparison gets you nowhere. Like you don't know what that person is dealing with or not dealing with. You might have your own stresses. And it's not to say that like, use them as excuses or whatever, but you can't compare, someone else's output to your own. Like you have to be really honest with, firstly, like what you know that you're capable of. Like, are you selling yourself short? Like that's a different kind of conversation. But if you're looking to someone else, like say like me, for example, I get this a lot, like, oh, like you're working all the time. Like, I don't know how you're doing so many things, that kind of stuff. You don't know that like my situation in other areas of my life, right? Like I'm not saying I'm not working hard, because I fucking am, but like I don't have these other sorts of stresses in my life that like maybe other people do. And so I know that I can, like, I don't have a partner coming in at 8 p.m. be like, what are you doing? Come and spend time with me.
Yeah.
Like I can sit there and work all night and like no one cares, which sounds really depressing. But it's a plus for me in this at this time, because like I know that kind of like now's the time. Like I don't have anyone to like answer to. I don't have anyone that like requires my time ongoing, to do things for them. Like I am for me right now, and not in like a selfish way, but if I'm gonna give it everything I've got, now's the time.
Yeah, but I also think the way you do it, you're doing it from a place of calm.
Yeah.
Like you're not running off.
Although I don't know if that speech was calm.
That was a passionate speech. But I think there's a very big difference between operating at a high level from a place of calm versus doing it from a place of fear or anxiety, where you're running off that anxious energy all day, because that is what burns you out.
Yeah.
If you can operate from a calm place, amazing. Then you'll be able to get a hell of a lot more done. The anxious energy is what's going to burn you out. So if you can, implement things, whatever it takes to bring you into a calmer state, meditation, yoga, beach walks, getting out in nature, all of those like slowing down, switching off activities, saunas, whatever it is. I know you're really good with that sort of stuff. Like you do your hot and cold therapies, like you're always out doing your beach walks in the morning. So perhaps that's partly why you're able to operate from that calm state, and the fact you don't have like emotional stresses going on outside. I think that is like a really important thing for people to focus on. Like if you are going to be hustling really hard, make sure you're doing it from a calm place and not an anxious place.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, whenever money's involved, right, it can be harder to do it from a calm place. Like I guess like for those who don't know, when I'm talking about like my workload, I guess like to give context, at the moment I work like a 9 to 5 job. I do my like mindset and confidence coaching outside of that. We obviously have the podcast, and I'm working on a couple of other things, but I pretty much work from like 8 till 7, 8 o'clock, Monday to Friday. And then I'll do like a whole day on like Saturday and then sometimes Sundays. And I'm not saying that because I know we're talking about like glorification. I've never said it in a way that's like, look at me, I'm amazing. That's not it, like at all. I just say it to give, this is what I'm doing, right? And it kind of comes back to like, I guess our first episode when I said like confidence is quiet. Like I don't really feel like the need to kind of explain it to anyone as to like why I'm doing it or like try and get them to understand, because a lot of people don't, and that's fine. But coming back to like the calm point, when I decided that I was going to get back into business, because I used to be like full-time coach before COVID, and then I went back into corporate. When I was like, okay, I'm going to get back into doing my own thing because I want to help people, I want to do this, business interests me, that kind of thing. One of the actual main reasons that I did it was because I could go into it from not a place of scarcity. What's the opposite of scarcity?
Abundance.
Yeah. I was like trying to think of that word. Yeah. Because I don't need more work, if that makes sense. Like my 9 to 5, I love it. It challenges me. I'm very passionate about it, and I could happily live off kind of that income. And so that was a big benefit for me going into business, because I was like, I don't need clients. Like I want them, obviously, and I want to be able to help people and grow and do all of those things. But I don't want to be in a position where like I'm sitting across from someone that I'm like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Like we're two very different people. I don't want to work with you, that kind of thing, and have to take them on because otherwise how am I going to pay my rent? And B, like I wanted to be able to hustle, but also like I can hit points now where I go, this doesn't have to be done now. I don't say that a lot, but sometimes I go, like you don't have to have this done by the end of the week, because you could not progress any further and things would be still okay. So that was a big benefit for me, almost doing it as like a bit of a side project to be able to move like from that place of calm.
Yeah, definitely. I have had that conversation with a client recently as well, in terms of like being okay with where you are sometimes. And sometimes you need to really accept that, especially if you do have other things going on in your life.
Yeah.
So for example, one of my clients who I've been speaking to about this topic a lot lately is a business owner and a coach who's also on competition prep and in a very early phase of her business. And, I've said to her, I know that you really want your business to grow, but I think you need to realize that you're at the tail end of comp prep.
Yeah.
Like that is taking up so much of your time and energy. Like you can't be everything at once. Just be okay with your current client base for a couple more weeks until you finish your comp prep, and then go crazy on your business and try and, bring on assistance and do all that extra stuff that you need to do then when you actually have the time and capacity to do so. Like you need to kind of know your own limits with that stuff.
Yeah. I think that's an important point. Like say with my current situation, with my training is on maintenance. Like I am not trying to kick any sort of goals there. Like, I'm trying to still progress, because otherwise it's not that motivating to go. But I'm not like trying to hit a number or, trying to get super lean or anything like that, for exactly the same reason. I kind of looked at all the things that I'm doing and I'm like, I can't put my foot down in training and, do all this work and try and see my friends and stuff like that. Like you have to kind of, it's the eggs in the baskets, right? Be like, okay, if 4 are going into work, then I can't also have 4 in training. And it's learning to make those decisions. And as you said, trying not to pull all the levers at once, because then you just end up exhausted and not really progressing in any of them. Because I can tell you right now, if I tried to make huge training gains right now, I wouldn't. And not only that, my business wouldn't be growing because I'd just be doing everything shit.
Yeah, you'd be cooking your nervous system.
Yeah.
And you don't want to ever spread yourself too thin. Like, it's okay to have multiple areas of focus in your life, but it's going to come in ebbs and flows which one is the most focused. So you just have to decide, like, what is your priority at that time? Where can you pull back and put something on maintenance to make room for something else to advance?
Yeah. I think as well, we can kind of like beat ourselves up with like the social, like the family aspect. Say if you do have a really big work goal or a really big fitness goal, you know, like I imagine that your girls on comp prep probably not seeing their friends and family a whole lot as they get towards the end. Like it's all just kind of part of it. And that's where you have to kind of come back to your why to be like, okay, I understand that maybe I'm not going to be available to my friends 24/7 for the foreseeable future, but I want to make sure that the ones, you know, that are super important to me, and this isn't like if I haven't spoken to you in the last 3 weeks, you're not important to me, but you know, I try and start plans so that the people in my life know that, you know, like you are important to me. I want to make time. Maybe I can only give you an hour this week, but I'll give you that hour. But it's not kind of sitting there being like, because sometimes I do. I sat there on Saturday night being like, oh, maybe I should be out. Maybe I should be, you know, socializing and all of that kind of stuff. But it's just a phase. Like it's just a phase of life that anything comes with sacrifice. And sometimes people, the social aspect of their life is the priority. Like, and you're right, that's not as glamorized. Like if someone was like, I really just am prioritizing like time with friends, time with family, yeah, probably not given the same pat on the back as me going, I'm prioritizing work.
Yeah, definitely. But that's okay if that is your priority as well, because that is an important facet of your life too.
Yeah, for sure. I just don't think like it's not seen in the same way. But I do know that I've gone through phases where probably when I got up here, like when I moved to Gold Coast, that I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna be social for a bit. I'm gonna say yes to plans. I'm not gonna try and like kick any big work goals or whatever. Like those kinds of things were on maintenance. And I was putting all of my attention into my like social health because it really is like an aspect of your health. But it's just making sure that you're kind of not taking all of the eggs out of that basket if you're going, you know, to have a work goal or a fitness goal or something like that, because you can't have it sit on zero. I've had it sit on zero. Like sometimes I get to the end of the week being like, should probably go and see another human.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, lucky I've got housemates at the moment just to get those like little bits of interaction, but
Yeah.
it is making sure that you have enough balance.
Yeah, 100%. I was just thinking about the other day when we spoke, and I was explaining to you that I don't like working in an office. Just imagining you like sitting in this dungeon all week, like from like 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. every day.
Yeah, Bec was like, does it have natural light? I was like, do you think I work under the stairs or something? And you were like, oh, I don't know, I'll have to see how I go. I don't like confined spaces. I was like, I'm not going to throw you in a cupboard. Like, it's literally like a bedroom with a giant window. I'm not sitting in a dungeon somewhere, like being like, turn the lights off.
Well, that was the vision that I had. But anyway, I want to, I guess, kind of go back to the hustle culture and what's glamorized like online. And I guess, you know, being wary of what people are putting out there and what you're seeing and what you're comparing yourself to, because I think this kind of goes in multiple ways where, you know, there's a lot of people out there just posting like their laptop at 8 p.m. at night or whatever.
Yeah.
Being like, you know, hustling and promoting that, you know, you need to be grinding all day long. But on the flip side of that as well, if I post that I go to like the beach at lunchtime, everyone's like, oh, look,
must be
online
nice.
coach just goes to the beach all day.
Yeah.
When actually like I got up and started working at 6 a.m. or probably even earlier most days.
Yeah.
To be able to go and spend an hour at the beach
correct.
on my lunch break. And I think it's just people put out what they want you to see and just try and not like paint a picture in your head of what someone else is actually doing just based on what they post online, because it's the highlight reel. People are going to show you what they want you to see. And for me, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to post a photo of my laptop every morning at 6 a.m. Like, that's not exciting content, but look how beautiful this beach is. I'm going to take a photo of that. So I think you just have to be wary comparing yourself to other people online.
I think you and I maybe like look at Instagram differently in terms of like how we post, because I probably would fucking post my laptop at like
there's
6
nothing
a.m.
wrong with that, but
what I was going to say is like I do it from a place of not, because I think there are people who post it to be like, look at me, I'm working all the time. I actually do it because I know that women might be on Instagram, looking at social things, especially maybe on a weekend or something like that, where they might go like, oh, everyone's out or like everyone's drinking and stuff like that. But you don't see the person who is at home on a Saturday night working on their business, because most people don't post that. Because it's like, oh, it's kind of boring. Like, I'm not out with my friends. I'm sitting here home alone. I, just made myself the same dinner that I've eaten for the past 24 days. Like, that's not super interesting content. But I post it sometimes to show that, hey, like if you're at home, not kind of doing the norm of like what we're told, is fun and exciting, like that's okay. If you're working towards something bigger that has your focus and, you're having to sacrifice for that. And it does require a lot of sacrifice because, yeah, you have to look at all of those posts and stuff and be like, well, I'm not there. I had to say no. I guess like that's the reason why I kind of post that stuff. And I'll never post it if it's not real.
Yeah.
I'm not like, here's my laptop and then I'm going to watch Netflix.
Yeah. Yeah, I think though it doesn't matter what the intention behind a post is. It's like, how are people perceiving that? Like when I post that I am at the beach at lunchtime, I want to show people that, hey, I am making time for stillness. Like I'm practicing what I preach here. It doesn't mean I'm not grinding hard, but then the people who haven't seen me get to where I am over the last 10 or so years, they just think I go to the beach all day.
That's a them problem.
Yeah, I know. But that's what I'm saying. Like it's all about how people perceive what is online. So be careful of comparing yourself to something that you are just perceiving and you don't actually have any context on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all those comments and stuff, I think a lot of people will say them as well, maybe from like a place of jealousy. Like projection is just, it happens a lot. Where it's like they're just kind of saying that to you, like as in like, oh, it must be nice being at the beach or whatever. It's like, yeah, well, that person probably wouldn't be willing to put in the work that you did to be able to go to the beach in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
People like to kind of like drag others down or like even internalize like their own comments to make themselves feel better. It's like, well, that must be nice. Like they couldn't have it, so then I don't have to go and work for it. Whereas like a different perspective might be looking at you at the beach, on say a Monday in the middle of the day, being like, wow, I would like that. I wonder how she got that. Like maybe I should find out or stuff like that. Being like, instead of trying to take stuff from other people, work out that like you can actually like have it for yourself as well. Like no one's looking at you being like, oh, she didn't kind of work to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I sometimes get comments like that, but people just haven't seen the background and what did get me there, I suppose. But I think as well, when you're in different phases of business with different priorities, like right now, my biggest priority is actually like learning to make more time for balance, because I did hustle really, really hard for quite a long time. So my focus now is finding a better like work-life balance.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because I actually had a conversation with my housemate yesterday and we moved in together probably a bit over a year ago. And I was already prioritizing work-life balance at that time. And she was like, when I first saw you work, I was like, wow, it feels like I don't even have a job in comparison, because she was like, it's just nonstop. Like, I just can't believe like how much you work. And that was me scaled back.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just, you've got to acknowledge as well, everyone's in a different phase.
Yeah.
And right now I still want to have a really high output in my business. Obviously, I still try and get back to my clients like as quickly as possible and provide a high level of service. But what I'm working on, and like this business consultant that I've recently started working with, is all about automating more things and I guess delegating more things and freeing up more of my time for some work-life balance and also other things that I need to do that I don't have time for within my business at the moment, like adding that extra value for my clients and creating content and doing those sorts of things that I just haven't really had time for.
Yeah. I think, like busy is not productive, right? It's like a lot of people just kind of like fill their time making themselves feel like they're working really hard. It's like, yeah, but why are you working hard? Like, what are you trying to produce? And is what you're doing getting you closer to that? Or are you just filling time doing a bunch of shit? Like,
Yeah.
I think like working out why you're hustling is really important, because I know that, say for myself, I've always been a hard worker. I don't know, kind of like my parents brought me up that way, definitely. But say like me and my sister are very different. Not that she's not like a hard worker or anything, but she's kind of, those people who are just kind of like content like with what they have. Kind of jealous of them sometimes.
Yeah.
This seems really peaceful. But I've always been like this, as in like since I was 18, 19, I was, uni full-time, work full-time, training. And yeah, I guess it's a lot of my identity is tied up in that. But I would say that in my like early 20s, I was probably doing it to distract and also to feel like I was like worth something. Because I'd always been a high achiever. I was actually speaking to a friend about this yesterday. That's how I got praise, like growing up. Like you're good at the thing. And I was like, oh, this feels nice. So I have to like keep being good at the thing, and I have to keep working hard because people like me because I work hard.
Yeah, I relate to this so
Yeah,
much. I feel like I'm talking.
Yeah, like it's all right. I'll talk for a second. Yeah, like, and I really used to struggle with that, because you kind of hit a point where you're like, yeah, if I can't work hard, or maybe if I'm not successful. I'll give you an example. Like when I was unemployed during COVID, I think I spoke about this in episode 1. There was like, I was going for a job, taking like ambulance calls. And it's a really hectic like hiring process. It's like 6 or 7 rounds. And at that point, I was like, when you're like, this is going to fix it. Like I'm unemployed. I was so broken. I was like, this is going to fix it. If I can get this job, like I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be back to being me, because I'm going to be like a high achiever again. And I got all the way to the end. And then it was like, no. And I was distraught. Like you would have sworn that like someone died. Like I just was like inconsolable. Like my dad had to come home from work because I was like broken. And like that's not a normal reaction to not get a job. But I'd never not gotten a job before, which sounds like, I always kind of struggle to talk about these things, because it's like people don't really give you sympathy, because it's like, oh, boo, like you always got every job. But it's like, yeah, that actually comes with like a decent amount of pressure. And I just had never kind of like dealt with quote unquote failure before. But it taught me a lot. And now I'm like, in the place that I am now. And obviously that's not what was meant to happen for me. But I know that, I guess, like before that point, I was definitely trying to outwork everyone, because I thought that's what made me me. And I thought that's what made people like me. Whereas now I know I'm not doing it because of that. I'm doing it because I want to help people. I'm doing it because I am passionate about business. I like learning, and I just like living, like sucking every inch of life that there is, to have. Like that's why I'm doing it. I'm not doing it to prove anything anymore, but I definitely was.
I think that comes back to that being driven by fear and anxiety thing. And I think the reason you're probably not operating from that place now is you've probably done a lot of like work on yourself and your inner child wounds and things like that. And something that I notice a pattern in with people who do like hustle really hard and have that high achiever personality, including myself, we tend to come from an I'm not good enough inner child narrative, which means that essentially, like when you were younger, for whatever reason, you felt like you had to prove yourself to someone or for some reason, and therefore everything you do is just an attempt to prove your worth. And that's 100% where my high achieving attitude came from.
Yeah.
And I have not just been like this in business. I have been like this in everything.
Oh,
like
you never
sport,
meet
school, everything.
You never meet someone who is just like this in one area.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
sorry, I don't think I've ever met that person.
No.
Yeah.
And I definitely think for that reason, I didn't cope with failure very well either. And probably had a bit of like fear paralysis around making certain decisions in my business or my life because I was scared of failure, because if I failed, that fed into my I'm not good enough narrative, right? There's this book that I recommend to so many people, and I'm going to say it now. A lot of my clients will have already heard this, but I read a book called How to Do the Work by Dr. Nicole LaPera. Sorry?
I'm halfway through.
Yeah, because I told you about it.
I know, I need to finish it. Anyway, sorry.
It is the best, and it made me so aware of why I am the way that I am and why I do have this high-achieving personality, and that enabled me to actually do some work on that and address that narrative and like work through that. And I feel like now I'm able to, you know, take more risks and not be scared of failure because I don't believe that I'm not good enough narrative anymore, and operate from a different space in terms of my business. Like I'm not doing it from a place of fear and anxiety and just trying to like be better and prove myself all the time. But yeah, it did take me time. And I guess, you know, like we're both 30 plus.
Excuse me, I'm 29.
Oh, you're 29. Well, we're close to it. Sorry. But like as you get closer to your 30s, like you kind of do start to do that work. But yeah, if you are starting a business and you are still in your early 20s, like that's probably something to be aware of if you are in that high achieving personality. Like, do you have that I'm not good enough narrative? And is that why you're operating from a place of like fear and anxiety, trying to prove yourself? Because it's not really a healthy driver. Like try and do it from a place of passion rather than a place of being scared.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's one of those things that I think I actually learnt the skill from having that not good enough mindset, which sounds kind of counterintuitive. But there is a part of me that thinks like, yeah, I was doing it from a place of trying to prove myself and, you know, probably that like I've got to prove that I'm good enough. I don't feel that I am kind of narrative. But fuck, now I'm like, I know I can pull the trigger if I need to pull the trigger. Like, and I'm not encouraging it, like, but I do think that there are fewer and fewer people now who have that next gear. Like, I don't know. I think it's a skill that you learn. I don't think you have to learn it the hard way, like the way that you and I did. I do think there is an element that you can probably only learn what we did by, you know, getting to a point where you're like, oh, this isn't working. Like, I've got to kind of work out why I am the way that I am and then take that skill. Like, you don't have to lose your identity, I guess is what I'm saying, because I think that's what I did struggle with letting it go. Is I was like, I this about me. Like, I like the fact that I believe I can outwork anyone in the room. Like, I actually really liked that part of me. So when people would kind of come at me, not come at me, but like, you know, talk to me about it, I got quite defensive because I was like, I don't want to have to let that go. Like, I don't want to have to, you know, it was always just you need to rest more. I'm like, yeah, whatever. You need to rest more. I'm fine. Like, because I didn't want to let it go. I liked being the person that did all the things. I liked being the person that, you know, could go and learn anything or could outwork everyone. And I didn't want to let that part of my personality go. But now I've kind of learned that you don't have to. It's just like where the intention behind it is. But I do think you kind of have to learn that you do have that like lever to pull or like next gear, because I think it's a really powerful position to know that you have that in you.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a powerful position. I think it's more so just being careful to wrap your identity in something like that, because then if it is taken away from you for whatever reason.
Yeah, correct. I can attest to that.
Yeah, then like what do? Like you're a mess if that's taken away from you.
Yeah.
So you need to remember that you have identity outside of that. So when we're talking about identity, like, you know, you're not just a business owner. You're not just an athlete if you're an athlete. You're not just those things. Like you're also like a friend, a daughter, like all these other things in life. Perhaps you're a mum. Like, you know, there's so many elements to our identity, and we need to think of our identity in terms of like who we are, not what we do.
Yeah. It's traits, because that's the
Yeah.
thing is it's not the business. It's not, yeah, as you said, like the athletic career or whatever it is. I feel very fortunate to now have had the experience through COVID where I was unemployed, because I never thought that I would have that. And it was very like unsettling, like, because I would wake up and, when you're used to being like, all right, I've scheduled everything down to the minute so I can fit everything in. And then you wake up and you're like, maybe I'll go for a walk today.
Yeah.
Like I would do like a little workout in the backyard and I'd be like, the fuck do I do now? And I had to be like, I'm not the person who is doing 5 things. I am a hard worker. I can do that now. And it was actually that kind of like identity trait. And I'm more than just that, but it's just one element of myself. It was that like identity trait that actually got me up in the morning, and I was like, my job is to find a job. That's my job right now. And I would sit at that desk for literally like an hour or two. I would like make phone calls. Like, it was knowing that I had that in me that actually got me out of it, because a lot of people just sat there and waited for it to be over or complained about it and was like, oh, my job has been taken away. And I'm not taking anything away from those people. But it was that trait and knowing that I had that in me that was like, okay, well, I'm going to go and find any job. I'm willing to do anything. And that is what got me to kind of like where I am now, not just like sitting there being like, well, my whole identity is gone. I can't be in the fitness industry anymore. What am I going to do? Because the fitness industry wasn't my identity. It was my work ethic that was my identity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. And that's just such a growth mindset to have, which I think we were speaking about in the last podcast, is to have that taken away from you and to be like, okay, what can I do about this? That's just a growth mindset rather than a victim mindset, which I think growth mindset and high achieving personality tends to go pretty hand in hand, I would say.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to recognize though that like I do still struggle to rest.
Yeah.
I know that's an area that I have to improve in. I don't want to make it seem like, yeah, I used to struggle with this and now I'm sorted and I can work really hard and everything's great. Like I do still, like yesterday, like I was like, fuck, I've hit a real energetic wall.
Yeah.
I think I'm much better recognizing it now and not just powering through. I do still feel guilt though. Like I do still feel like last night, it seems absurd. I finished my normal job at like 5 or 6 or whatever. And then because I didn't go and do more work, I was like, oh, I should. Because in my head, I have this kind of like, this is what it takes. This is what it takes.
Mm.
You're not doing what it takes. And so that voice is still there. Like it's not gone, but it's not as loud.
Yeah. I think on that, you get into this place where you feel so guilty being unproductive. And I have 100% been in that mindset. And I still do struggle with that in terms of doing something unproductive. But a really good way to kind of look at it is the unproductive time is going to make you more productive in that productive time.
Yeah, that's what I tell myself now.
Yeah, and that's something that I try to implement nowadays is like having some unproductive time. I will usually read a novel or something like that, but I'm not going to read a self-help book in
I still do that.
I know.
I literally like the other night was like, I'm going to take a night off and watch Huberman. I was like, this is not chill content.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like you need to have unproductive time where you're not educating yourself further. Like, I mean, everyone also, I feel like, demonizes like watching Netflix, for example, or watching TV. And I used to do the same thing. I didn't even own a TV for years because never even watched it. And I would always feel like watching Netflix is being lazy, but it's actually not. Like you need to make time to do those things where you actually just switch your brain off. So you need to see being unproductive as part of your daily schedule. Like it's a productive task because you're giving back to your body and resting your body and your mind. So I think that needs to be perceived differently.
Yeah, that is something that I tell myself now because it's the only way I can kind of get myself to like be okay with it. If I'm like, okay, this time is going to help you be productive in the future. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think like most high achievers are going to feel that way. Like you can't just be like, yeah, cool, doing nothing is good for me. It's not enough. I need to have a bigger reason as to why I'm doing this. And so if I'm like, okay, like I'm going to take tonight off, that's going to make me tomorrow better. And I enjoy all the work that I do as well. As soon as it's starting to feel like a real kind of like uphill battle, I'm like, all right, I need to like chill so that I can get back tomorrow and like start enjoying it again. But yeah, you're right. The mind numbing stuff and like sitting and not doing anything. I mean, the fact that it is agitating to me is probably a signal that like still some work to be done.
Yeah.
Roll your eyes at me. Um, but yeah, I'm getting better at it, like recognizing it and then just being like, all right, I'm just going to take like, the whole night off. I think I did a post on it the other day being like, people tell me to rest and I do. It's just often not for like a whole day.
Yeah, you don't have to do it for a whole day. But
Yeah.
I think you need to make some time. And, that looks different for everyone. Like now I really try and have Sundays off because I work 7-day weeks for God knows how long.
Yeah.
But it's also like easy for me to say because I learned this lesson the hard way. Like I literally hit rock bottom with my adrenal health. And that's why, I will call you out on these things and say like, Loz, you need to take some time for you. Like you need to actually rest because I can see where that can go. And, I do that from a place of love with you, obviously. I know you're hustling and, like, that's fine. And, like, I fully support and encourage you in what you're doing. And, like, I love seeing you chase your goals so hard. Like, it's inspiring. But at the same time, I think it helps to have someone say, hey, like, you actually need to look after yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it does come from a place of experience. Like, I've been there and I burnt myself out. And that's why I can now attest to this, but it doesn't mean I didn't learn that the hard way.
Yeah, it was funny. I was speaking to Ben last night and he said this line and he was like, you being able to work hard isn't the reason I like you. It's why I worry about you.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I've gotten that a lot. I was like, you have this narrative that, like, this is why people value you. He's like, no, like, this is why we're all concerned for you. And I'm like, guys, like, you don't need to be concerned. But I just thought that was that line, like, kind of like wrapped it up really nicely.
Yeah, that is a pretty good summation, I think.
So, key takeaways.
Yeah.
What do you, because I know like this was obviously like your number one topic. So, what do you want everyone to know or take away from this chat about hustle culture?
I think I would love people, especially people in the early days, like starting a business or like feeling like they're in the midst of that hard hustle where they're grinding all day long. I want people to start making time for that stillness and switch off time. Like you can only work as hard as you can rest. So instead of trying to just work all day long, think about how you can be more productive with the time that you work by actually implementing some stillness in your day, whether that is breath work and meditation. Like it could literally be 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't need to be this big, huge task. Whether that's walking barefoot on the ground, outside, sand, grass, whatever it is near you, doing something like that, whether it's watching Netflix, whether it's reading a book, whether it's having a bath, just make sure you dedicate at least a portion of every day, even if it's only 10 minutes, to switching off and coming back into stillness. And I think if you can do that from the get-go, then you are going to operate more from a place of calm rather than a place of fear and anxiety in terms of your hustle. And you're going to be less likely to experience the negative health consequences of grinding too hard.
Yeah, I love that. I think mine would be to like find your people. I think I talk a lot about like your circle because I just think it's everything. And I don't think we attribute enough importance to it. When I say find your people, it's like you don't all have to be working towards the same thing, and you don't even all have to be in the same phase where like everyone's grinding, right? But I think if you have really big dreams or you're like in a phase where you're like, I am working towards this thing and it's really important to me and I might have to sacrifice, other areas. Having people around you kind of like understand that and like encourage you as well, but also look out for you is really important. I think if you're surrounded by people who are not kind of like doing the same thing or like at least moving in the same direction, like say if I had a bunch of friends who all they wanted to do was like party and go out, and they were kind of just happy in their jobs, not really wanting to like progress or anything. This is not me saying everyone has to own a business, but I like people who just want to get better at anything, really. If I wasn't surrounded by those people, it would make my own journey feel 50% harder, because I'd feel like I was constantly missing out on what I like should be doing. Whereas like my current circle are all kind of like moving in the same direction, or at least all have that like value of wanting to improve. And so I very rarely have to like explain to anyone, if I'm not coming to something or if I'm not doing something or whatever it is, because people just get it. And not only do they get it, they're actually like rooting for me. They're like almost every single one of my friends, it's like so beautiful. It's like, I love seeing what you're doing. Like, you're working really hard. Like, I'm really proud of you. Like, having that around you is just like, it's invaluable, because it doesn't make me feel like I'm sacrificing a whole lot. So yeah, I just say choose your people and take them on the journey with you.
Yeah, I love that. I think having a good support network is everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, that's it for today, guys. I hope that you loved this episode. If you did, or you feel like one of your friends could benefit from it, please share it with them. Also, we would love if you could give us a podcast rating if you're enjoying listening to us so far. And we will be back again next week.
Yeah. See you then, guys.